Well, it's time for another update on Asteroid Commander. And, well, first of all, you can see that the news feed at the bottom is working now. It's about 10 or 15% of the news feed items, the pre recorded items, are now in memory. And I'm going to have a bunch of items generated on the fly, in particular stock market reports. And I will probably put sports scores generated on the fly as well. I've got a couple in here just plugged in for now, but I will probably have those randomized and generated on the fly. So there will always be something new appearing at the bottom of the screen here. There will also be occasionally items dropped into the news feed that uh, as certain events in the storyline occur, you will see certain items appearing in the newsfeed. Um, Secondly, I went back and I looked at my stars, and I kept working at it and kept working out it. First of all, I worked out all the bugs, and then I took another look at my arc cosine function, and I realized that I could through multiplying by powers of 2 and then multiplying by some fraction between 1/2 and 1, I could convert any denominator into 64. And then doing the same operations on a numerator would mean that I would only need a single arc cosine table. And this is the result here. You can see that there is some zigzagging and jiggling around, and the sun's actually only moving up and down by like 1 pixel at a time here, but it's significant because the screen is 255 by 192 pixels. I set the V scale and H scale both to hex 3.3 to get that. And the Vera card will attempt to do that and take that 255 by 192 screen and show it on a VGA monitor. So it tries to stretch that to, oh, here's Orion, by the way, tries to stretch that to 640 by 480. So half of the pixels are actually 3 pixels wide, and the other half of the pixels are 2 pixels wide, and 3 pixels tall for half of them, and 2 pixels tall for half of them. So each one of these pixels, this could be 3 by 3, 2 by 3, 3 by 2, or 2 by 2. And so that that alone contributes a lot to the jitter that you see with the stars. But when you go fast forward, you can see them flickering around like that, but you do have, like I say, recognizable constellations. You probably recognize a few of them if you're into uh, astrology or whatever. That's what you'll see in the equatorial band here. Let me just go to the equatorial band. There we go. So you'll see them. The sun actually will change its right ascension. It'll sweep through the entire sky over the course of an orbit of the asteroid. So that's going to happen. It takes 2 years for the asteroid to orbit the sun. So over the course of 2 Earth years, you will see the sun move across the sky and be in different constellations over the course of a 2 year span. So let's just quickly zip down to 73 South. Here you can see Polaris up here, and if I just go fast forward, you'll see all of the stars moving around Polaris. And there are recognizable constellations. Here comes the Big Dipper. You can also see, let's see, here comes, I used to know the names of all of these, Perseus and well, here's Andromeda, and you can definitely recognize constellations here. Oh, I'm all the way south there. Want to go north here a little bit more. I have made a number of other changes just by reducing it down to one arc cosine table like that. that's reduced the size of the code tremendously. It started out as 32 kilobytes of RAM plus 13 kilobytes of VRAM for star data. And the second version I had in the last video, that one was, um, let's see, that one was also 32 kilobytes. Yeah, that was 32 kilobytes of RAM. I got that down now to 7 kilobytes of RAM, 6 kilobytes of lookup tables for my math functions, and 1 kilobyte of code, and then 4 kilobytes of VRAM for the star data for 1022 of the brightest stars. And here we are looking at, we're at 58 north, so we're looking at, we're centered on 58 south right now. And if I hit fast forward, you'll see just a ton of stars, because the southern sky actually has more visible stars than the northern sky. And it seems like there's just a huge number of stars on the screen sometimes here, but there's only 64 at a maximum. So it just takes the stars from brightest to dimmest, and if it runs out of stars, I think I've got 64 on the screen right now. There's only 1022 stars plus the sun, so 1023 stars that have an apparent magnitude of less than 4.61. And most people never actually see those stars. They see, well, if you live in a big city, you'd be lucky to see 100 stars. So anyway, I'm really, really happy with the way the stars have turned out, and I think if I'm on another game that I've got in mind for the future, if I go with a 320 by 240 screen instead, then I won't have this problem with stars being different sizes depending on where they're shown. And I can have a much better viewpoint. I think if I have one that's like 192 pixels across instead of 96 like this one here. So anyway, next things that I'm going to be doing, zoom in. Right now all it does is blanks out the stars and gets rid of the reticule, but that's going to change. It's basically going to be looking at the same area that's shown in the 3D view, but in a directly overhead view, rather large, and I'm probably going to have to do a whole bunch of really fun tricks with 4-bit per pixel tiles and sprites, and probably have to have some greeble sprites just to add some kind of texture so it's not just triangles of color on the screen here. I still have to do these two buttons here. I still have to figure out how to do those, and the stock market will of course depend heavily on how I do resources. And well, so will the information button. You know, that'll determine how much money you have and how much of various different resources you have in your inventory, and various other bits of information. This one here will be when you click on, when you're centered on a particular area, it should be telling you if it's an area that you haven't used yet. It should probably tell you maybe some percentages or something like that of various different raw materials. Or if it's here on a building, then it should tell you like the production of what's going on, what resources it's producing, and what it's consuming. And now that we've got the stars working here, you can see Orion passing by here. Come on, there's Betelgeuse peeking out behind the asteroid. There's the belt. So I got actual recognizable constellations. I'm very happy about that. Yeah, up to 6 ships visible no matter which view you're in. They'll be all around this 32 pixel. Well, let's see, that's 40 pixels. Yeah, they'll probably all be around the 32 to 40 pixel area, somewhere in there, radius from the centers. And so depending on what view you are, they might be behind the asteroid or in front. So that's going to be a bit of a programming challenge as well, but heck this whole thing is. Um, I have also decided that this here, when you're moving to a new view, you notice it takes a certain pause. It takes a certain amount of time to do all those calculations for the ray tracing every time you move or every time you rotate. And I'm thinking of breaking that subroutine up into probably 4 subroutines so that when I do music later on, there will be a break in between doing this long subroutine for the main program to check things like music and stuff like that and do them quickly before going back to calculating the rest of the asteroid. So, anyway, next thing I'm probably going to be doing is zoom in and perhaps the ship orbiting the asteroid, the ship you came in on. And then I'm thinking probably this window here will have to come up next. So I've got a whole bunch of content still to come in, a lot more messages to write, a lot more newsfeed items, a lot more buildings to design, probably another 40 or 50 buildings to design. And I've got all of this population stuff to work on and storyline. And so, oh, and then music and sound effects. So I've got quite a bit of work ahead of me, but I'm thinking that the really heavy computational stuff that I've got left so far is going to be the zoom in view, the uh, the position of the spaceships that orbit the asteroid. Um, that's really the only really heavy computational stuff. I think the spaceships stuff will probably be using a lot of the same lookup tables and functions as the stars do. So I will have to. I've got about a kilobyte left in that bank, so that's probably what that kilobyte's going to be for, is showing those ships orbiting orbiting this asteroid. And so we'll see how much I get done by the next time. So until then, have fun, happy programming.